Welcome to the Airflow Podcast. I'm your host, Rickey Thomas, and this is the place where Kingdom heirs go to be informed and inspired. So sit back, relax, and flow with me. Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the Airflow Podcast. I'm your host, Rickey Thomas, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming to the show Pastor Alvin Love III, lead pastor of Nashville Life Church. Pastor Alvin, thank you for joining me this morning, sir. Definitely appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rickey. It's an honor.
It's definitely an honor is mine. So I want to talk through a few stages here. Obviously kind of your upbringing and kind of what got you into ministry. And then from there, just talk about, your role and what your assignment has been like as the lead pastor of Nashville Life. So, I like to start from the beginning, just so people who may not know who you are and understand your journey, just kind of get to know you as you've come up through this thing. Cause I think it's very important for people to understand that, everybody comes from different walks of life, but when they come to Jesus, it's a transformation and it switches them and they start doing things and seeing things differently, but knowing where they came from is always a good thing. So I want to kind of get into that, but, just starting off, growing up in the family structure, your mom and dad, founding pastors of Nashville Life Church, your dad has done a lot of things from a corporate American standpoint, and then kind of switched over, being heavily involved in ministry. And then obviously your mom, for those that don't know, is CeCe Winans. So legendary gospel singer. And I just say legendary singer in general, not just gospel, but just overall, just, her and the Winans family. So having them as your foundation from a parental structure. And then, obviously your sister, Ashley Phillips, who's just as crazy as can be, but, I love her so much. Having that strong family structure and in your formative years, how important has that been to kind of shape how you are as a pastor today?
Oh, man. Okay. Yeah. My family have been, definitely probably my number one influence when it comes to who I am and how I think and how I do relationships. I think if I can pick one thing in regards to shaping who I am as a pastor, having my parents and my sister and really my family in general, including you, I'm just really grateful. I think pastoring, you meet, like you said, people from a lot of different walks of life and a lot of different backgrounds. And to be honest, I'm sad to say this, but simply even having parents who are together and who are married, growing up with a mom and a dad, that's something that I was guilty of thinking that kind of everybody had. And as I pastor and meet different people who come through the doors, just simply having that strong family unit, mom and dad both in the home, and having a family that communicated, that knew how to handle conflict and get past conflict and get loud and get upset with each other, but then by the end of the night, laughing with each other and watching movies, like that was just my life. And pastoring people now who've never, I've got people who've never had a healthy conflict. They run away when there's an issue. They think that if someone's upset with them, that means that they're rejecting them forever. And just these, I never would have ever considered. I'm like, you really think like that? And I just realized, man, a lot has to do with how you were raised. And so the closest of my family and our ability to, dog each other and laugh at each other, but support each other, and just all those dynamics I've really grown to appreciate more in these last, 10 years or so. than I ever did growing up. So I'm really grateful for my family and that upbringing.
Yeah, and you mentioned, the fact of having both parents in the home and in a loving family, and it's an almost an oddity nowadays. And growing up, you feel like, in a way, you kind of feel embarrassed to tell people you got a great family structure, because it's like, you might get ridiculed for that. Like, oh, you got a good family.
It's true.
Yeah.
My dad, he's from way back. I think he's 73, and he said that growing up, if it was kind of a big deal if your parents weren't together. It was
right.
Like, yo, together. He said now it's a big deal if they are. It's like, yo, their parents are still, and like it's just amazing hearing him, who's lived as long as he's lived, to see this unfortunate trend and shift in culture. So I say that to say I'm someone who is very grateful. Of course, like you said, Jesus changes everything. We have tons of stories within our ministry, and just even in my life, of people from broken families and single family homes that because of Jesus, they were able to totally just keep moving forward without missing a beat. And the Lord, knows how to restore situations. He makes beauty out of ashes. So we definitely know that that's not the end all be all. God knows how to heal at the same time. It is a privilege when that's not a hurdle that you have to really, get past, or at least not of all the hurdles, because I've got plenty of hurdles, but that's right. One that I'm grateful that I can say that I was just blessed with, and that is that example in my parents and the rich family relationships that I have.
Yeah, and just knowing, obviously on your dad's side, and me being a part of that family, and then knowing how close that side of the family is, and even when we're not around each other, but when we come around, it's almost like nothing's changed, but some years have passed. We got a little older, some a little bigger, a little more gray hairs, but the love is still there. And I know you've had that on both sides. So I'm sure that has helped to really mold your mindset around building strong families.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can definitely tell you that there are attributes on both my dad's side and my mom's side that have been major assets and balancers to the other side as well.
Right.
Because both sides have, like all of us, there's strengths and there's weaknesses, and there's pros and cons, and life has a way of just balancing, things out if you're keen to notice how to do that. So yeah, I'm grateful both for the Loves and the Winans. I think one of the best things I got out of the Love side is just that name.
Yeah.
That's still something that I'm proud of, and amongst other things.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool name to have, especially as a pastor who's focused on talking about, Jesus' love for you. And you're like, I'm Pastor Love. So it just kind of flows together in a way. So it is cool.
It's true. For those who don't know, my grandfather and your grandmother are siblings, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And so that's one thing about the female, that they get married off and get a different name, but me being from Granddad Alvin, the love stayed on my side.
Right. Yeah, you definitely got it. But hey, it's all in the family. It's in the genes. So
that's right. We're all
yes, sir. So now, one of the things about you, and I recognize that even at a young age, is that you had a great love for the arts, acting, singing, and dancing. I remember the plays you used to do at TPAC, dance recitals or in competitions, and, trying out for Star Search and all that kind of stuff back in the day. And obviously being around the entertainment industry with, around your mom and uncles and just family and that, I'm sure that played a big part in the music side of things. But what else kind of sparked your passion for the arts when you were younger?
I don't know. I mean, I think the obvious answer is my family, but honestly, at least as it pertains to my mom, like she's always said and will say to this day that she's never loved the arts to the degree that I did. And maybe even Ashley for that matter. My mom is a rare case of someone who's talented and she's good at what she does. But if you ask her, it's never really been a passion for her. It's just been something that she saw as a calling and something that she gifted in. But my mom's really never had a hunger for the world that she's found herself in. Whereas me, I couldn't get enough of it. I was when it came to music, when it came to movies, like you said, dance, anything, I was drawing all the time. I just got bit by the arts bug. And I really, especially maybe my mom's brothers, maybe there's some people, I know there's a lot more kind of specific passion when it comes to music and arts, but my immediate parents, dad and mom, I was kind of an oddball. No, those two weren't really that way.
I know your dad was into sports and stuff like that, and
all day, every day, and mom was, just raising us and working and reading the Bible.
But she's very competitive as well. I think the whole family is competitive, but when it came down to whether it was playing Uno or whatever game that was out there, bowling, it was like a different side would come out. All that love and stuff she would beat up on you and then pray for you afterwards and pat you up.
One thing they don't know about is her, and then even my grandma, they both get these reputations for being, so sweet and mild, but put them in a game and you see a difference.
Hey, you can't grow up in Detroit, especially your mom with all those brothers and not compete in some way, shape or form. So
that's true. So as far as where I got it, man, I'm sure there's some elements around the family, but I think I was just a sponge and, we watched a good amount of TV and movies, and I was just that kid that I didn't really consume entertainment the same way that others did, where I was just kind of watching it, enjoying it. I was thinking how that and how did he do that and why can't I do that? And I wonder what made them pick that note instead of that note.
Right.
And as a little kid, I was always analyzing the content whether it was a record that I was listening to or a movie I was watching or a play I was seeing. My mind always went to behind the scenes, what it took to put that on and how could I be a part of that. And I don't know where I got that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a gift. And I noticed that even the times that we would do like the little in-house productions of our little plays, that you were like so serious, like you couldn't mess up and you had to do the lines right. And
I apologize.
Like, oh no, it was cool. I mean, that added to the funness of it, because me and Ashley would always exploit that and like, hey, we're gonna make Alvin mad. We're gonna do something different. And then you would like freak out, like, okay, I'm not doing it anymore. You guys are not working. You're not being professional. I'm like, dude,
you're not operating. That was my word. Cooperate.
Yeah,
please.
but it was,
man, it was fun.
That was
always, and I still got a lot of that. I'm kind of using that part in different ways, but that part is still very much who I am.
Okay. Now I know obviously very busy, pastoring a growing congregation like Nashville Life, but I mean, at this point, do you still make time to work on any of the arts? I know you do some stuff with Nashville Life music, but do you look into any other things from the art side, or is it just mostly around specific Nashville Life stuff?
Honestly, yes. The past few years, my primary, really my main outlet that I have with the current plate that I'm working with is a little bit of music via our music team at church, Nashville Life Music. Our church, a lot of churches do it, but our church, we write out a good amount of our songs. And after doing it so long, it started to catch attention, and people were wanting to listen to those songs at home, but they weren't recorded. We were just doing them at church. So people were doing like bootleg voice recordings. And after a while, we were like, man, it's probably time to record these, if nothing else, just for our church, for our congregation. That was like, man, I was looking that song up for 2 hours. I couldn't find it. I'm like, because it's not out. So we finally did it. And that's cool because I've been pretty tunnel vision when it comes to our church, Nashville Life, and really working around the clock on that. So I kind of accepted that, at least for the time being, that music wouldn't be a priority. Obviously, I'm still a musician. I love music. I still frequently come up with little melodies and start ideas. But as far as dedicating regular time to it, I pretty much accepted that couldn't happen. Right. So I was grateful when I saw that Nashville Live Music kind of that door opened, and I got to still, exercise a part of that part of my life through Nashville Life Music. As far as the other arts, man, not really. Definitely not. The dance stuff stopped pretty much after high school. And then I think I studied music at Belmont, and I did a few showcases, and there were like competitions. So I did pull from that part of my life and called some of my guy friends that used to dance with me back in the day. And, I'd bring those shoes out a couple times in college, but as far as, those are like maybe 3 or 4 times in 4 years. So that really is a lost thing. I still feel like I have an eye for it. I still can recognize, if stuff is good or not. Like I that's still a part of my life, but right. I don't do it at all. And then I'm really into movies, man. Like I feel like that's something I wrote a screenplay for fun during the quarantine, during that lockdown. And I would love to maybe venture into that format with film and maybe screenwriting and things like that. That's something that might come around. But right now, it's just music, really. That's the main thing. Everything else is kind of hibernating, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see the screenplay and coming up with movies and stuff like that. Just like I said, from back in the day, I remember your dad bought you the director's chair. You had the megaphone, and you were like all in that, so seeds were planted a long time ago for that. So
right. You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So
yeah, I like to think of myself as still, pretty young. So I think there's time for a few things to come around again. So, we'll see.
Okay. So I know in terms of, getting back to some of the music stuff and, writing, and you actually had your own project back in the day, the Strawberry Project, which I remember that. So you've actually put out a little bit of work there from the music side, but you've also worked and you got a couple of Grammys writing and producing for your mom. So how cool has that been?
Man, I can't believe it. It's especially, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like you said, I came out of Belmont wanting to be an artist, wanting to be a producer. I was doing a lot of performing. I put out, an EP and started touring that. I was fortunate enough, somehow, I think through my cousin, Joy, she was hanging out with some people, and PJ Morton was around. They were all hanging out, and she had my EP on in her car. And PJ asked who that was, and she was like, "That's my cousin." So he reached out, and I became, I guess, music friends with him, and got to open up for him on the road.
Oh wow! Okay.
And started getting some shows. And things were really kind of picking up. This was around 2010 or 11. And then the other big part of my life, which obviously we know how the story ends now, I'm a pastor, but the workings and the beginnings of what's now our church started right around the time that I started picking up as an artist, as a performing, touring artist. And man, I couldn't believe that it was happening, because I worked so long to get to that point where that traction was coming. And then, man, right when it was really taking off, I guess, you can say my heart was just totally stolen and arrested for Jesus, and particularly what he was doing through me and my friends in the ministry. And Rickey, like, music went from being like my number one goal and vision to something that I really couldn't care less about, at least at the time, because I was so consumed and excited and passionate and focused on what God was doing in me and in my friends. So I stopped taking shows. I stopped promoting the music. A lot of people thought I was crazy, and it was just something that no longer was my priority once things started happening in my personal life with me and my friends and their friends and the house meetings, and then what's now our church. So I say that because music was something that I told you that I just kind of pushed to the side. And in the midst of all the ministry and the beginnings of our church, my mother said she wanted to go back in the studio. And at this point, she had been out of the studio for, I think she hadn't done an album in like 8 or 9 years, something crazy like that, like a new record. And I immediately had an idea for her and started working on that. And once that came out a few years later, I got to win 2 Grammys, one for Best Gospel Song, a song that I co-wrote with Dwan Hill. And then I got to win for Best Gospel Album because I produced it along with Tommy Sims. So I ended up getting a Dove Award and 2 Grammys out of it. And it was during a time that I had, supposedly walked away from music. So it's kind of ironic that I got, I guess, the bucket list, Grammy during a time where I wasn't even really trying to do music. So it's kind of it's just ironic how that happened.
And it's really, you think about it, I mean, God knew the desires that you had, because I'm sure when you were touring and doing all that stuff, you can see yourself performing on shows and winning awards and all that stuff. And then you walk away, and like you said, it was just like a total change for you to walk. And a lot of people, like you said, will think you crazy, because they're like, this guy's a budding artist. He's growing. He's got a following. He's got a buzz going out there. And then he just walks away from it. And God still honored that, because he gave you the inspiration and the tools to create something for your mom. So that's pretty dope to be able to do that. So, that's just God being God. Your plans, your plans may have changed, but he always knew where you were supposed to go with this. So
that's cool, man. Thanks for saying that. That's encouraging perspective. And you're right. That was definitely a little bit of a wink, I guess you can say, from God, that he, like you said, he knows our heart. And especially when we put his kingdom first and we seek him first, takes care of the rest. And I definitely count those Grammys as a part of the rest that he's been gracious enough to add on as I, continue to try to keep him first and seek his kingdom,
Yeah, that's for sure. So, yeah, you kind of touched upon the church part and how Nashville Life sort of started, where the seeds were planted. And it kind of all came about with this trip to Australia a while back. Can you kind of talk about what part of that trip changed your life to where because you've always been around church, you always had a love for Jesus, but to where it was just a personal, just being wrapped up personally to focus and devote your life to minister and just to worship and praise. How did that take place in this trip to Australia?
Yeah. I think it's just all the factors wrapped into one that made it as impactful. I personally was, like you said, I did grow up in church. I've had periods where I believe my love for Jesus was active and alive, but after college, it wasn't. And I was really just consumed with myself and my doubts and loneliness and just a lot of negative feelings in my soul. And that was the place I was in when I moved to Australia. I moved. Australia wasn't the original plan. I just wanted to get out of Nashville. And, having a large family and a connected family, there was just really no place I can think of that we didn't have a close friend or a pastor friend that would, have somebody outside my place to pick me up, taking me to church on Sunday morning, and a place that my parents couldn't be like, I don't know, just everywhere from Chicago to LA to New York. Obviously, Detroit, like just all the cities that I liked. I was just too connected, and I wanted to go somewhere where I could be a little bit obscure and a little bit anonymous and just disconnected, because I guess it's kind of a cliche thing, but maybe like a soul searching kind of trip.
Yeah.
And so Australia came out of the criteria of, where do we not know people? Where do we not know people that I can just not have to, I don't know. I just wanted to do my thing.
Yeah.
So Australia, and specifically Melbourne, because we actually do know people in Sydney. So I didn't pick Sydney, and I went to Melbourne. So it was a little bit of that. I was kind of trying to get away from the familiar things, not specifically God, but just all things familiar, including church. And I got invited to a church, and I was hesitant to go, but I went because I didn't know anybody in that whole city. So I figured I would at least, and by the way, the person that invited me to church, we were out there years ago, and the driver for my mom and us years ago was around my age, and I kept in touch with him on Facebook, I think. So I told him that I was coming. He was the only person that I knew. His name was Paul. They called him Wally, and he had a spare room at his place with his roommates. So I moved in there, and he invited me to church. And really the sole credit, I think, to that trip being what it was Brahm and Diane Manusama. They're the pastors of Melbourne Life Church in Melbourne, Australia. And I met them after church, and they are very zealous for God, very zealous for his people, very bold people, passionate people, and particularly prophetic people. I think they really have a gift of seeing past the surface. And when they met me, I had a big smile on my face, but they saw past the surface and could tell that my soul was in bad shape, and actually told me that they saw that while I was meeting them.
Wow.
At feet, I was shaking their hand, and Diane kind of just like she does, just kind of went for it, and told me that she thought that God had entrusted me with them. and I needed to go to their discipleship class that they offer called DMS. And it was a 9-month class. My plan was only to stay for 3 months. And that was probably day 4 of my 3-month trip. And I went to the orientation for that class, which just happened to be the Sunday that I visited. The first day of the class after church was the day that I was there, which I thought was pretty crazy. Wow. So that day I decided to commit to do this class, called my parents and said, I don't really know who these people are, but I feel like I'm supposed to stay for this. And so it was that church. It was those pastors. They really kind of took me in as almost like another kid for them. And I went through 9 months of pretty intense ministry and hard work. And I confessed things I'd never confessed before and forgave people I never forgave before, and just let the ministry of the Holy Spirit really, really do a lot in my life. And so, yeah, could it be that I was in Australia? Maybe. Could it have been that I was in that class? Because like you said, I'm not new to church. I'm not new to the Bible, but there was something about this specific time and this specific ministry and these specific people that made it all click for me. And that's what started everything.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, they miss those God moments, and I think that's what it was for you. It was being it was a God ordained time for you to be where you were. So it wasn't an accident. It wasn't an accident they met you after church. It wasn't an accident that the discipleship class started that day, because right. If it probably would have been a few days later, you might have been like, I had a chance to think about it. And might not have done it, and it missed. Exactly right. And missed out on that opportunity. So, I mean, I think it was just all God ordained. And it's the beautiful thing, going through that boot camp, kind of a ministry boot camp almost.
That's what they were sergeants and I was just it was boot camp, man. It was rough, but I needed it.
Yeah. But, obviously it equipped you, because then you come back. And, to kind of fast forward a little bit, you come back and now you are starting, you guys started Bible study and things inside of your parents' home, where you're actually leading your peers, which is something that is very difficult to do, especially for young people, is to lead your peers to Christ. So talk about that experience of doing baptisms in the pool out back and all that. Like, how was that whole thing, kind of a grassroots approach to building the church?
And I love it. I'm so grateful. I mean, I believe I'm grateful for all churches, and I believe every story is, inspired and awesome. But I'm really glad that our church happened the way that it did, because it is really the heart of our church. Our vision is following Jesus, building leaders. That's the vision of Nashville Life. That's like the vision statement. And that's my life. I was the lay person. I'm just a Christian. Who am I to lead somebody to Jesus? Who am I to open the Bible and speak? Who am I to baptize somebody? Like, I just thought I was just, a guy who was saved and was going to heaven when he died. And that was good enough for me.
Right.
And to be led in a way where God was constantly drawing more out of me and pushing me more and more out of my comfort zone and elevating me. The more I submitted to him, he would just, share more and more of his influence and authority, where I was doing things like, I remember when I came back to Nashville, I was just sharing my testimony. And that's something that anybody can do. You don't have to be ordained, or you don't have to be a pastor to share your story.
Right.
The woman at the well, she just shared her story after meeting Jesus. That's so you don't need credentials to do that.
Right.
And that's all I was doing. That's how all this started. I was telling my story, what happened in Australia, and people started coming over to the house, and this is my house before I moved to my parents' house. They started coming over, and me and my roommate, who had an encounter with Jesus through this whole experience as well. My roommate at the time, people start coming over, and I remember Skyping my pastors in Australia, literally asking, like, are we allowed to do this? Like, we're just these dudes. Like, I was like 24 at the time, 25. I'm like, are we allowed to do this? Like, we're having these Bible studies, and like, they're like, yes, absolutely. So the whole time during that section, I was just always asking, like, can we do this? And then we got some up to our house, and we were like, man, people are showing up and they're coming back, and people are getting saved. People were getting healed. I would pray for people and they would get healed. I'm like, are you really? Like, because, you know, growing up, I just thought that that was for those people over that person, not anybody, you know? And then, like you said, baptizing people in the pool, and just the Lord was just inviting us to what now we're walking in now. And that's this authority and this grace to lead people to him. So it was really exciting. It still is. It's still kind of surreal because you never really see yourself as somebody, you know, or at least we don't.
Yeah.
And so whenever I'm up there to preach, I'm always like, I mean, it's been years and I'm still like, man, I can't believe God has allowed us to do this, you know? And so I'm really grateful for it, because now I can talk to the person who just thinks of themselves as a church goer or just, you know, a believer. And I take so much joy in really empowering the everyday Christian that you've been called to do a lot more than you think, you know? And that's such a part of our story.
And that's good. You said, you know, empowering the everyday Christian, because I think a lot of people do fall into that bucket. They're like, I'm limited to this, you know, and really with Christ, there's no limit to the power that you have. It's just more so of you walking in that faith, knowing that you are called to do so much more. And so that's great that was unlocked in from your perspective, because a lot of people would just look at it and say he knows that, like you said, knows the Bible. He's been around, you know, gospel music. You know, his mom has been around the world singing and ministering to people through song. You guys have visited so many churches. So, I mean, you've been churched for so long, but there comes a point in time where, you know, there has to have action. There has to be action in that process and winning souls. And that is, you know, one of the main things that we're called to do as Christians. Like you said, with our testimony is ours, but that's authentic. And that's what helps to draw people, because they understand that you can come from any situation and be led to Christ, and you can become a totally new person. So that's great. And I'm glad that you guys have used that as the foundation of building the ministry, because I think that's very important for, especially nowadays, we need that. What I was going to say is, you know, obviously your parents started off as sort of the founding pastors of Nashville Life. And then recently, you know, as I mentioned, you're now the lead pastor as of January of this year. When did you realize that was your assignment?
Man, good question. You're good at this, by the way, Ricky. Great job.
Thank you.
I don't, pretty early on, man. I think if you look at the history of it, whether I knew I was going to be a pastor is maybe up in the air, but I have carried the burden for this ministry and these people who've come through my house and then my parents' house, and now, you know, our church location from the very beginning, even before we were Nashville Life. I was working. I'm like I told you, like I walked away from a career in music because I was so invested. And I think arguably in the beginning, even more invested than my parents. And they'll tell you that. And I think that's kind of cool. I'm grateful for that, because my parents' side story, they've been getting prophecies since 95 that they were going to pastor the church.
Wow.
And it never resonated with them. It was never a desire that they were aware of. It wasn't like, yes, thank you, God. It was like, nah, they might just be saying that because, you know, she's CC Winans, or like you said, they come from a gospel family, and, they're well-known Christians. So maybe they kind of honestly at the beginning graciously maybe thought that maybe those people weren't hearing correctly. But it kept on happening, and different people every other year, just about for about 10, 15 years, if not more, they kept on hearing that you guys are going to pastor one day. So I say that because the story could have easily been my parents decide to start a church, and they bring me and Ashley in the room and say, hey, we want to start this church, and we would love for you guys to, help us build the church and serve at the church. And that would have been cool. But honestly, it was the opposite. It was like me and Ashley, we were all excited because all of our friends were having these transformative experiences with God. And my parents, it was nowhere on their radar. My parents, the house, when our church started, our house was on the market. My parents are moving to the West Coast. They're moving to California to live on the beach and just kind of live that kind of semi-retired life. But the enthusiasm from me and my friends really compelled them, and they believed that God was using us, me and my friends, to let them know that the time was now to start a church. So I was always invested. And then I think the first week of our church, my dad, who never does this, by the way, said that the Lord spoke to him. I don't know if it was in a dream or if he woke him up. And again, my dad is not someone that frequently has those sort of testimonies. Mm-hmm. So we were like, man, we should probably take heed to whatever my dad wrote down. And I think the second or third thing that he wrote down was that I was going to be the heir apparent to the church. So that was from jump. That was like day 3 of Nashville Life. So even though I didn't become pastor until 9 years in, my dad pretty much aired publicly to everybody from day one. And to be honest, it didn't seem off to me because like I told you, I was already invested. I already had this ride or die kind of commitment to what was going on. So then it was just a matter of whenever dad thinks it's time is when I'll take it. In the meantime, I'll just serve under him and serve my parents and serve in whatever capacity I'm needed. So I've done everything from being over life groups to singing with the music team to working with the media to you name it, just wherever there was a need. I drove the shuttle back when our meeting was at the house and people parked at the elementary school around the corner. I drove the van. So I just did whatever was needed, because I was just, like I said, so invested. So I think I've always known ever since Nashville Life, I knew that my life would never be the same because of this church. And yeah, January of this year, 9 years later, I am now lead pastor.
And I think that's a good way to look at it from, when you were talking about all the stuff that you've done in the church up until becoming the lead pastor, it kind of just speaks to servant leadership. And that is basically what you've been doing. You haven't just been sitting in the back and, telling people what to do. You've been out there, kind of on the front line doing things and helping to build the ministry from the ground up. So that's important. Different areas of the ministry that, because you've worked in different areas of the ministry. So you've got, some feeling of things. And as a leader, that's important, not to do people's jobs for them, but you understand some of the challenges that they may have because you've served in those places and to be able to help, kind of guide from that perspective. So that's definitely pretty cool. One of the things and we kind of wrap up a little bit with this, but one of the main topics I want to talk about is really pastoring during the pandemic. And I know you've spoken about this before, but becoming the lead pastor at Nashville Life Church, and it was kind of like right in the height of the pandemic. I mean, we're still going through a little bit. But not only that, but being, we had a kind of a very polarizing presidential election at the same time. And what I love about the church is that you guys have, it's a different mix of cultures and age groups, socioeconomic backgrounds. It's really kind of what the kingdom church is supposed to be like, everybody from all walks of life coming together. But I know that there's also there had to be some some strife and some challenges during that time for the congregation. How has that been for you to kind of have that trial by fire or faith at the same time, joining that, kind of becoming the lead during this time?
Well, it's been hard. It's been harder than I anticipated, specifically because I think it's been hard for everybody. I don't think there's a single church that hasn't had a difficult time in one way or the other. So I don't want to make it like we have an uncommon, struggle. But I think what has made us unique specifically is the diversity of our church, specifically with politics and race and socioeconomic background. With those things often come a way of thinking and a perspective. And those perspectives can be very competitive with the perspective of the kingdom. And it's difficult to tell what is you and what is God. And sometimes we think what is us is God and what's God is us. And people's opinions end up becoming synonymous with their identity in Christ. And that's tough when people have different opinions. So now we've got this person who's in Christ and this person who's in Christ, and both think that the other side is deceived and the devil and wrong and hateful and a sinner and all that. So, man, I've literally been in the middle of all of it. We've had a lot of trials. Again, it's nothing that I think is uncommon, but to come into that climate, it was pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. We're still sort of in it. We've lost people from both ends of the spectrum. The people that wanted to hear more social justice, more Black Lives Matter, and kind of made that synonymous with the gospel. So since we weren't speaking about Black Lives Matter, we weren't preaching the gospel. So naturally, you're not going to stay at a church with someone who's not preaching the gospel. Here I am preaching death, resurrection, Jesus Christ, and they're going, you're not preaching the gospel. So, so we lost them. And then a few months later, election, if you weren't voting conservative, you weren't standing for the gospel. So even though I'm literally teaching about the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus, because I'm not speaking against the left agenda, that I'm not of God, and this church is, so we've lost both ends of the extreme, whether far left or far right. But it's made the ones who are part of the church a lot tighter. We've got a group of people that are really committed to us and to the vision of the church. I still miss a lot of people, not to mention the people that are just not around because of COVID or not. I don't even want to say it's not even COVID anymore. I think during the lockdown, people lost their rhythm of coming to church.
Yeah.
And we still have a handful of people that it's not even concern over health anymore. I think it's just hard to get back on the horse when you've gotten off. And so there's that. There's the political stuff. Yeah, man, it hasn't been for the faint at heart. I've been tested in a lot of ways. And it's really been a major, test of endurance. And thankfully, because of prayers of my parents and support from them, not to mention a handful of amazing pastors who have made themselves available, that I totally take advantage of. I think I call one of them every day, if not more times than once a day. And it's because of the support system that I've been able to take the jabs and take the hits, take the rejection. Then there's the whole, you're not your dad, and we're used to him, and I'm a little bit younger, so I'm believing that I'll look back at this time of the 2022 period, maybe the next couple years, as really refining times for me personally and for the ministry of Nashville Life, and honestly for the body of Christ. I really think this is universal.
I think so too.
The pruning happening. I think there's a refining happening. There isn't a pastor I've talked to that hasn't echoed at least a degree of what I'm dealing with. So I'm encouraged. It's hard, and I don't enjoy a lot of the difficulty, but reading the Bible and hearing about trials and seeing what God was doing, I can't help but believe that some amazing things are being developed for the glory of God and for my growth.
Yeah, and it's kind of cliche, as what they always say. You can't have a testimony without the test, and I think just what you have been experiencing. I know that others. I know my pastor. He talks about people leaving because certain things aren't discussed all the time, or if you're not standing on one side or the other, then it's deemed controversial, or you're not standing up for your people, or I'm like,
I'm telling you.
At some point, you got it.
I'm sure Pastor would have a lot in common the past year.
Yeah. And I mean, our church isn't as diverse, but obviously, when you've got more, from the African American side that go to your church, and a lot of the Black Lives Matter things, and there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of emotion that takes place during that time, and it's like, hey, why are we not discussing these things? And they're being discussed, but the biggest thing is taking it back and centering it around the message of Jesus.
And that's exactly right. And to me, unfortunately, that's centering it back to Jesus. First of all, everyone has a different definition of what that is and what that should look. And the thing about it is whether it's an all Black church, all white church, the reason why everybody's been able to relate is because regardless of the racial demographic, human beings, we all have our own opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So even in a room full of Black people, you still got about 200 different perspectives and opinions and personalities. And same with white people. If it's a room full of Asian people, everybody's different.
Yeah.
So no matter what, there's always this tug of war of holding true to what you believe God is telling you to do and say versus what the people are telling you that you should and shouldn't say. And that's one of the struggles that pastors have to deal with. Even going back to, I was reading Moses and the stuff that he was going through, and that tension between obeying God and then kind of appeasing the desires of the people that you're following. And it's tough, but the good news is that it's not new.
No.
I'm not the first person who's had this struggle by a long shot. Especially when I read, it's encouraging when I read something as old as Moses. I was reading Numbers 11 the other day, and Moses talking to God, being like, man, these people, they're driving me crazy. I was like, I feel you, Moses.
Yeah.
But then you see God come through for him, and you see great things still happen. So yeah, it's a part of me was like, man, why did you pick now for me to start this? And I think the most encouraging thing that I heard from a friend was that God thought that you were the one for the job for this time. And that was convicting, but also really humbling and honoring. So I'm still trusting that God knew what he was doing when he had me take it on this time in the midst of everything that's going on. And I'm just trying to take it day by day, man.
Yeah. And I mean, I think obviously you've been prepared for this, and just to bring it back around, we talked at the beginning, you mentioned how your family and growing up and being able to deal with conflict in a healthy way, and being level-headed about it, and having those crucial conversations and things like that prepared you for a time like this. So all of that training, the time in Australia, going through the boot camp, all of those things, prepared you for this. It's still going to be challenging, but you've got the tool set to do it. And I think that's where, when you're on assignment for God, that's how you know that you're in the right place. No matter what. Even Moses, like you said, dealt with, like, look, these people, but understanding that he had to take a chance and take the opportunity to vent, but then get back on assignment and do what he's got to do.
Right. Back on assignment. That's right.
So I think a lot of people, they miss their blessing or miss their calling because they get off assignment and then they never get back on it. They just give up saying, I don't have to deal with this. And so they're never quite right. And their lives are never quite right.
Well said, man. Well said. You're right. I think that's been my last year and a half. I've had times to vent and to emote, but it always has to get back into, there's a job to do. There's people, of all the people that are not wanting to follow, there's still the majority who do, and they need me, and they need me to be in faith. They need me to be in prayer. They need me to be hearing from God. So it's really been a good lesson for me, learning how to stay, like you said, stay on assignment, stay faithful, and not let the outliers and the naysayers distract you from what God is calling you to do. So I'm right in the thick of that, man. I'm right in that. That's the best way to describe where I'm at.
Okay. Well, just kind of last thing, and then we'll close it down. Obviously you guys are continuing to grow, and recently you purchased your first church home.
Yeah, man.
So how is that going? What's kind of the updates on that process?
Yeah, it's so funny. I actually left that part when I was listing all the difficulties, social and political stuff. I left out the building, but yeah, on top, the icing on the cake is, in the midst of all this, we are in a transition location-wise and under a big construction renovation project. We took an old church on 2639 Nolensville Pike, about 100 years old church, and are renovating it. And because of COVID and back orders and demand and delays and several little details and setbacks, we've been trying to move into this place, man. And between codes and a few other factors, it's just been longer than anticipated. And every pastor warned me and told me that it's going to be longer and more expensive than what they tell you. And you hear that, but yeah. I think just that naive idealist in me is like, it's going to just happen right on time and we're going to get in.
It's that childlike faith.
Dude, that's right. We thought we were going to be in December 2020, man. And needless to say, not in it right now. So I feel like I've been saying this since March, but we are about 6 weeks away from getting in. I think there's a few delays and pauses that happen, and we're good. We're moving in. We'll be in pretty soon. As soon as the date's out, we'll let everybody know. But yes, we're very excited. It has been a little frustrating. But yeah, so we're really excited. And as soon as the word's out, we'll let you know. We'll let everybody know. And we're going to have a big old party probably for a couple months, honestly.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I'll definitely be there. So, to join with you guys in the celebration. I just wanted to end this and just say, I thank you for taking time out to share this information, just share a little bit about yourself. I'm definitely proud of the journey that you've taken, how much you've grown, and, just continuing to to let the Lord lead you and just seeing where you're going with this. We've got a lot of history, obviously being family, and it's not surprising to see you here. It's just, it's kind of like one of those proud moments when you just sit back and like, man, this is how God is working. I can see all the God moments, throughout the time that I know that I've spent close to you. So, definitely proud. I love you, man. And I just keep going. I'm going to keep praying for you and encouraging you. And, I'm loving where this story is going, and I know it's going to have a great ending. So just keep pushing, man. Keep walking in the faith.
I appreciate it, Rickey. And I admire you and seeing what's happening in your life and your family, big family. And I don't know, it's just crazy to see how life takes us to like the people that we're going to be, and to see you be a husband and father and so faithful in your church and your ministry. And now with this podcast, it's really cool to watch and see. So I share that same pride and respect.
All right. Well, I thank you, sir. And, we're going to stay in contact. Now, if people want to get in contact with you, with the church and be connected with the ministry, how would they do that?
Well, our website is NashvilleLifeChurch.com. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We've got a podcast where all of our messages are on YouTube channel. So pretty much anywhere you can find our music's on Spotify and Apple Music. So honestly, type in Nashville Life Music or Nashville Life Church, and you'll find all of it. And then I'm on Instagram.
Okay, so you guys heard it, Nashville Life. Look for him on all the social media platforms. Pastor Alvin Love III, lead pastor of Nashville Life Church. We thank you. God bless you, and we look forward to seeing the continued growth of your ministry, sir.
Hey, Rickey, thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up another episode of the Airflow Podcast. Once again, I just want to thank Pastor Alvin Love III, lead pastor of Nashville Life Church, for joining today, sharing his journey, sharing a little bit of his testimony, and just, being transparent about the things that he's been going through, good and bad, experiences as a pastor, his process of becoming a pastor. And, I just really hope and pray that listeners had an opportunity to hear his heart and understand that his ministry, his gospel, his process and what he's doing as a pastor is, teaching the love of Christ. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ. And, the gospel, it's good news, but it's the good news of that Jesus loves you. And it sounds basic, but there's so much power in that if you're not careful, you would bypass that because you start looking at differences. Pastor Alvin, I've listened to several of his sermons. He preaches very well. He's a teacher. And he's able to take basic things and he can relate them into his message with Bible scriptures and things. So he's definitely a good teacher. He's a good pastor, and he loves Christ. He wasn't crazy when he turned his back on the music industry. He wasn't crazy when he, said, I'm going to follow Christ. I want to move to Australia, across the world, halfway across the globe. He moved and wound up being part of a discipleship course. And through that, discovered a deeper love for Christ. And this is a man that grew up in a home that I know personally, they were not just churched, but they believed and they spoke the word of God. It wasn't just an act. It wasn't just, a show or something that they just did for people to like them. Pastors Alvin and CC Love, they truly do love the Lord, and they instilled that in their kids. And so you're seeing those things come up today as they have Pastor Alvin's there, lead pastoring the church that they started, that they were the founding pastors of. And it all came through
a mixture of his journey and prophecies that they received. I mean, at one point, I don't know if they still do it, the whole family, even Ashley, Sister Ashley was leading and giving the message on Sundays. See, people think that God always has to call the qualified. He didn't always call the qualified. And they're certainly qualified, but he calls the willing. And if you're willing and able, as scripture says, you eat the best of the land. And again, that doesn't come without trials and tribulations. But what it also comes with is a guarantee that Christ will always be with you. He will always love you. He will always protect you. And so that's why it's important to understand, there is a great love that Christ has for you. This episode is titled All for Love, and it's a play off of Pastor Alvin because his initials are ALL, and his last name obviously is Love. But he preaches the love of God, the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's his foundation. And so when you become a pastor and you take over as the lead pastor in the middle of an election and a pandemic where the country, the city, the church has been so divided, then you think, how is a new pastor going to handle this? A new young pastor going to handle this? And he's still here today pastoring. Why? Because God gave him the tools. He had already prepared him for this. Even when Pastor Alvin didn't know, he was already being prepared for this time. So your preparation, your journey may not be to pastor a church. It could be for a certain job. It can be for your family. It can be anything. But you have to keep going. You have to keep living. You have to keep making sure that relationship with Christ is right. And if you're doing that, then I guarantee you will. You will succeed. You will have joy. You will have peace. And you will know God's love. And knowing God's love is the greatest thing ever. You will never feel lonely when you have God's love. And I mean that. No matter how many people you have in your life, how many people you don't have in your life, no matter how many relationships you have, you'll start seeing things differently. And you'll have a peace about you. And that peace is the love of God. So, again, I'm going to step off my spiritual soapbox and, just try to wrap this up. But again, I just thank Pastor Alvin. He really shared a lot, and just, meditating on that throughout this podcast, just some of the things that he experienced, it just helped to encourage me, just to keep going. Don't worry about the things that I had planned for myself, and just make sure that I'm focusing on what he has planned for me. And he'll reveal it. Trust me. God will reveal it. It may not be when you want it to be revealed, but he's going to reveal it. So you just got to be ready and be willing and be open. So again, as Pastor Alvin said, you can follow him on all social media. Nashville Life Church website is also there. If you want information about the ministry or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to him. I also have the links in the description for those that are interested in checking out the ministry. They do have messages online as well, and they are in person. So, feel free to reach out if you're in the Nashville area and you're looking for a church home, and, sounds like this is a place that you want to go. Definitely. Nashville Life Church is a great church, and I'm sure they would definitely open you with open arms. As always, as we come to the ending point of the podcast episode, I always like to remind people that, if you are a believer, if you know that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he died on the cross for us and for our sins, and he was resurrected, if we know that, then we know that we are heirs of the kingdom. And as heirs of the kingdom, we were created to flow in the blessings that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We are all inheritors of those blessings. So understanding that, know that, continue to build that relationship with Christ, and continue to just get up each day and move yourself 1% closer to him. and you will see that you are flowing in what you were created to be and created to do. Again, I'm Rickey Thomas. Thank you all for listening. God bless you, and see you next time.